Hello my friends and welcome back to the shop. Today I wanted to show you something I'm doing. Here is the quilt that the customer dropped off. Someone made it for him a long time ago, and as you can see we've got some pretty serious damage. So you can see where I've already made some pieces and pinned them on, and I've started to do that here, and I decided I should show you what I'm doing. So you can do this a few different ways. I found some fabrics that kind of go with the color palette. You're probably not going to find the same fabrics, but most people are going to be okay with anything that just matches and looks like it goes with the quilt. They just want to be able to use it, wash it, and everything, be okay with it again. So you're going to find a few colors that look good with the quilt, and then you're going to cut some squares out. They don't have to be exact. We're not too worried about measurements here. They just need to be a little bit bigger than the finished squares on the quilt. So maybe like 1/2 inch or 1/4 inch larger on all 4 sides. So then I've tried doing this where I actually iron the edges down and try to measure and be all precise like that, but it just seems like if I go up to the ironing board and press all these sides under, once I come back over to the quilt, they're not quite perfect anyway. Because things get stretched and skewed over time, and it's just the way it is. So I find it's easier to just take your piece, and I'm going to just kind of fold and just kind of crease it with my fingernails like that. Let's see, let's put this piece right here. And like this piece here, I only folded under these sides because this one got covered up by the next patch, and this edge is going to get covered up by this patch. So I'm going to put this here like that and pin that on. Okay, so I've left some space here where this patch is coming more this way than where this seam is, so that there's room to fold. So even though the patch was large like this, I didn't want to just put one patch and have it be patched up and fixed, which you certainly could do that. But I wanted it to look like nothing really happened to this quilt. I wanted it to kind of look still patchwork, still like everything was okay. So I folded here and made it line up with where that crease should be, or that seam should be, I'm sorry. And I'm just going to pin it on. And I'm not going to actually bother to fold here because this will get covered up by the next one that goes here. And actually I'm not going to bother here either because there's a hole right here, so this will get covered too. So let's do that one next. Just any square that's been affected, I just recover the entire square. So let's go pink right here. So I'll fold. Place it here. I might have to do a little bit of a, like if I cover this and I see some stuff still poking out there, maybe I'll just do a little tiny bit of a corner flap fold there, just so it hides under. So now here's that edge I didn't do anything with because it's going to get covered by this, so we're going to crease it. Sorry, fold it. You know, and crease it right where that old seam would be. Just take some time of kind of folding and fiddling with it, just get it to line up nice. So basically this is what I'm going to do for the whole quilt. Anywhere I see a hole, I'm just going to cover that square with one of these patches. I'm going to pin it down, and then I like to hand sew them on because it's a little more invisible. It looks a little more in keeping with the original design. You could definitely machine sew it if you wanted to. You would just see some stitches right along here. You would just stitch it on in a square, and you would just see those stitches, and that would be fine too. It's totally up to you how you want to do this. So this edge here, I'm just going to leave it because there's still some hole right here, so this whole square has to be covered. So I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to pin all these on, and then I'll show you how to sew them. Our patches are all pinned on, and now it's time to sew it. So I have chosen a nice neutral beige thread that's going to kind of blend in with everything. And I have a nice tiny needle, and that's going to make it a little easier to get in and out of these without too much resistance. So here's my trick that I like to do for threading needles. Instead of threading one end of the thread into the needle, I like to take the whole piece of thread and fold it in half so that I have both cut ends of the thread together. See that? I have both cut ends, and I'm going to put them both through the needle. This is how I always thread needles, because I don't like to tie a knot and have that pop through all the time. So here's what I do. So I have put both ends through the eye of the needle. You can see I have 2 strands, and then I just kind of pull it down and give it a little twist so it stays. So now if you look here at the end, I have a loop. So instead of a knot, this loop is going to be our knot. So when I take my first stitch, I will then put the needle through the loop and then pull, and that's going to anchor everything together, and then it can't pop through. Plus we have a double strength thread, so it's a win-win. Okay, so there's a few different ways you could stitch this on. It's really up to you how perfect you want this to look. Most people are not going to be upset if they can see your stitches, but if you want to go for invisible stitches, you can. So if you wanted to do that, here's what you would do. So I'm going to kind of go up under, I'm going to start with this green patch here, and I'm going to go up under the patch. So we have our layer on the top that you see, and then we have our folded under layer that's under there that you can't see. It's only about that wide, right? So I'm going to go under there, and I'm going to only catch that invisible thing. See, if you see your needle popping out, then that means your stitch is going to be visible. So if you don't want that, back it up so you can't see that needle, and then angle back down. So we are sewing through fabric that will not be seen from the top. This is that underneath layer, that folded under thing that we creased. Okay, so I'm taking my first stitch and I'm going to pull this so it's almost through. There's my loop. I don't want to lose that because I want to put my needle through that loop. Now pull. Okay, so you don't see anything on the top. Pull tight and you feel it can't go anywhere, so that loop is working in lieu of a knot. Always when you're hand sewing, hold your needle by the eye of the needle, that way it doesn't come unthreaded. You don't want to have to keep threading it over and over. Okay, so I've taken my first invisible stitch here. So I have only gone through the green fabric though. We need to go into the base layer. So I'm going to go in the brown fabric here, and I'm going to make a little stitch like that. So I've gone in and back up to travel this way a little bit. I'll pull this tight. It's gonna get caught on everything, of course, so you just have to deal with that. Okay, so now where I came up out of, let me move this a little bit down, there we go. Okay, so where I have come up out of the brown fabric here, directly above that in the green fabric is where we're going to go next, just directly above it. So where the green fabric would be laying on top of the brown fabric where your thread just came out, we're going to pierce into the green fabric, only getting that under layer. If your needle pops through to the front like that, if you can see your needle, you'll see your thread. If you don't want to see that, back it up. Make sure you've only got the underneath layer. And then travel that way a little bit and go back down towards the quilt layer, like that. And again, you see nothing. This is good. Okay, so right where I've come out of the green layer, directly under that is where we're going to pierce through the brown. Travel that way a little bit, come back up. Okay, so we've come out of the brown. So now right where that green would be on top of where my thread's coming out, that's where we want to pierce in. Only the underneath layer. Travel that way. Now where it's come out of the green and the green is laying on top of the brown, that's exactly where you pierce into the brown. Travel a little bit and come back up. Now if you don't want to be bothered with this invisible stitch, you can do any type of stitch you want. So you can see there's this stitch here. You could copy this kind of a stitch. See where they've done the original quilting? This just little running stitch. You could copy that style. That would look fine, and then it would go with the theme of the quilt. You can do a little, whatever stitch you want. It really doesn't matter. It's just, if you care that this is invisible, you can do it this way. If you don't, it's going to be just fine. So like if you wanted to maybe even just trace where this line was, see their little line of stitches here? If your hem thing is deep enough, like if it came all the way over here, then you could kind of just continue that same exact stitch this way and it would look like it's the same thing. But it would leave little flappies. I probably wouldn't do that. So I like to do the invisible stitch, or sometimes I'll just kind of do a little whip stitch. Let me show you that. I don't mind sometimes if stitches show. I don't think it's that big of a deal, and I don't think the customers do either. So if you just wanted to do this, this would be perfectly acceptable too. So where the edge is, so here's my green edge, I'm just going to allow the thread to wrap around it and go into the beige over here and then come back up. Try to make them as small as possible so it doesn't look like Frankenstein, a bunch of stitches, but see, that's not very offensive to me. I think that's okay if you want to see a little bit of stitch. I don't think it's that big a deal, but if you make them pretty small, like keep it, oh, I gotta push that in. Keep the stitch very close to the edge on the green layer and kind of like almost under the green layer when it's on the beige layer, if that makes sense, like that. See, they're so tiny. I don't think anybody's gonna be upset about that. Just like that. This is a lot easier and a lot faster because you're not gonna be so fiddly and worried about it. It just depends on the project. It depends on what you're going for. Okay, so you can see it looks pretty good now. I found all the major holes and patched them up with squares. So let's look at the back. So here's one of the holes on the back. So I think this is probably the closest matching fabric I have. So it's a bunch of different colors on the back here. So to choose something, you just kind of want to figure out, if you squint your eyes, what color does this read as? And I think it's showing up a little darker for you guys than it really is, but it kind of just reads as a beige if you look at it from far away. I think this is going to be pretty good. So for this, we just want to make it as small of a patch as possible. You can make it an oval, or you could make it a square. It's really up to you. I think people know that when they're getting patches, it is going to be visible. It's not going to look like nothing happened. So we're just going to do exactly the same thing on the back, and we're going to try to be careful that our stitches don't show through to the front. So I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm just going to fold and crease all four sides and pin it down and sew it on. So that's basically it, you guys. I hope this helped you in repairing something. Let me know down below any thoughts, questions, or anything else you have to say. And so consider subscribing to the channel if you would like to get more alterations content, crafty project inspiration, entertainment, and other things like that. Thanks for watching. See you next time.